What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, bringing you another week of what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined as always by the trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing this week?
Good. Things are good. Herd immunity. Just fake news. Doesn't exist. But we're doing good.
Yeah, you know, as we get all these reports of herd immunity probably not being, a realistic thing that's going to happen at this point, festivals are, rolling out their lineups. Everything's opening back up, and it's just like, all right, well, we got enough people. We're going to... Those who don't want to get it are taking their chances at this point, I guess. So,
Brady shrug.
Yeah. Nothing you can do. But, we're going to be talking a lot of different things today. We got a couple of TV shows, we got a movie, and we got some albums. We're going to be starting with the Golden Globes because just a couple hours before we record this lovely Monday, May 10th, it was announced that NBC has terminated their contract, will not be carrying the Golden Globes next year. Obviously, we've been talking quite a bit about the issues with the Golden Globes and, their need to reform. All the hit pieces came out about them right before the show. They rolled out a couple of the members of the Hollywood Foreign Press to say, hey, we read those articles too, and we're going to change. We're going to reform. And NBC's like, wow, we're canceling you on our network. Is this the end of the Golden Globes, Dave?
It's a great question. I have to imagine something will exist, whether they keep the name or not. In addition to the Oscars, there's just, eyeballs for this kind of sort of thing, even if those eyeballs are declining. So maybe a brand new press organization that has credibility, unlike the Hollywood Foreign Press, maybe something could rise from the ashes with a different group of people, and you would figure that that organization also would not be subject to all the ridiculous things that the HFPA has done around the Golden Globes, like the incessant campaigning and obviously really problematic record when it comes to minority award nominations, let alone wins. So there's definitely an opportunity here to make something greater, but for now it just seems like it was, result of all the protests and activism in a certain sense, to kind of clean this kind of stuff up. And the HFPA clearly was not doing a good enough job, despite all this slew of headlines that continue to come out. And it just, it's probably not something worth saving, but I'd replace it in some manner.
Yeah, for as sad as it is, I think it's definitely the award show that gets the second most eyeballs, and on obviously it kicks off the movie award season at least. People like it because it's a looser award show where you get to just see celebrities being drunk, not taking things as seriously. So I think there's definitely a space for an award show like this. I think people want to see celebrities being just people and being weird and goofy and fun. But I don't know. It's I don't think they're going to be able to turn this around in just a year. And I can't imagine if they, don't get picked up for another place next year. Maybe they move to, like an online, only type show. That would definitely lose a lot of steam. It really opens the door for one of these other award shows, like SAG or BAFTA. I guess that's probably at too at the time too.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't think the Guild Awards are going to step up here, and the BAFTAs are such a localized thing. But the thing with the Globes, it's movies and TV, right?
Yeah.
And I actually think it's probably worthwhile to continue that format of combining the two. Not combine the two, but having the two on at the same time, just because the lines continue to blur when it comes to movies and TV in terms of how they're consumed and enjoyed and all that and made and everything, right? So, yeah, that's the thing, though. If you make something, especially if it has new branding, are you going to get the 9 million people that you got this year, which was a huge decline? I don't know about that, and how interested are people going to be to participate? and watch if it's just kind of another thing, similar to the Guild Awards, right? Where it's like, it's not really public. I don't know. It's there's obviously there's a lot of information we don't have about what's planned for the future, but this is pretty wild, I have to say.
Yeah, especially because I mean, part of I think what gets the eyeballs on is just it sets the tone for the awards season. It kind of sets the favorites, maybe like lays out some of the narratives for awards we will kind of see at the Oscars or races that we'll see throughout the lead up to the Academy Awards. So it's just you know something has to take its place. Something has to be the tone setter for the race season. But numbers are down. Hopefully, with all the movies that will be coming out this year, check out our 2022 Oscars preview breakout that we did last week. YouTube.com/NowstalgiaPod. There will be more interest in these award shows. The Oscars this coming year. I don't know. It's ripe for something to move into that space. I just don't know what it's going to be. Or if anything will. Maybe it will just be an empty space. It feels like a bad year for it with all the exciting stuff potentially on the horizon for movies. So we'll be keeping our thumb on the pulse of this story as it breaks down, develops a little bit more. But Dave, you mentioned to me that you watched a show on Netflix that I hadn't even heard of called The Innocent. Tell me about this.
Yeah, The Innocent came out last 2 Fridays ago, the April 30th, on Netflix in full. 8 episodes, a Spanish show based on a novel from Harlan Coben. Sorry, I messed up my handwriting here. Yeah, Harlan Coben. And Harlan has this big deal with Netflix, and he has a bunch of novels, and this was, I believe, the first one to be adapted. The Innocent, or El Inocente in Spanish. And this was a show set in Barcelona, made in that region of Spain, starring a lot of people, a lot of Spanish actors, and I think it's actually a really fascinating show because of the way it's structured, and it's a 8-episode crime mystery series. Each episode starts out with the narration POV of a character, but the twist there is that each episode starts with a different character's POV. And going from episode 1 to episode 2, it works really well. And episode 1 and episode 2 feel like 2 different shows. At the end of episode 2, those 2 characters kind of meet, and you're like, oh shit, they're like a really like solid, sticky hook to that mystery, that intrigue. And then this show really went off the rails. I was honestly baffled with how much steam this series lost over the course of an 8-episode run. It's just I think it's a lot of easy mistakes. It's just an overly complicated plot, way too many characters, way too many side plots. It felt like it was padded out. And towards the end, when you get, episode 7 starts off and you get that new character's POV. It's a character you already met, but you hadn't gotten their POV of certain things yet. From the jump, you're like, I don't need this. No, can we keep progressing the main storylines? And it just felt like the show was running out of steam. And sure enough, I found it very unsatisfying. But it was again kind of funny. I thought it was a really good setup, a really good hook, and it looks great, and the acting is strong. But man, there's this great example of hammering plot into your brain. There's just way too much, and I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, as you were talking, it almost sounds like the type of show that would benefit from just condensing itself a little bit down to maybe, I don't know how many episodes was this, 8 or 10, maybe down to 6 or 5.
Yeah, totally,
something like that. Well, it sounds like for a Netflix show, it was at least an interesting concept.
Yeah, and I would say it looks nice. It's well acted. It seems well made. And maybe for a lot of people, they might be very satisfied with seeing all this plot and all these twists. But to me, it just got a little extraneous, and you kind of lost your center of what you were rooting for, what the central conflict you're supposed to care about versus all the other conflicts. So, bit of a mess in the end. But I'll be looking out for the next novel they adapt from Harlan Coben, because it seems like it's pulpy shit. So, maybe there's potential for the next one to be better.
Well, Dave, I also watched a Netflix show that you did not watch called The Circle, and this is a basically a social media reality TV game show where these I think they have like 13 or 14 people total in the season come on, and you can like create this like basically a catfish identity if you want to. You can be yourself. You can be a version of yourself that you want to portray on the show. They give you challenges. The people never meet until one person gets kicked off, and then they're not allowed to say like the person that they choose to go meet if that person's a catfish or not. So it's kind of like a blind, kind of show that you're trying to figure out if people are being genuine or not. It's it's pretty interesting. The first season I watched, it was definitely a new type of show, and they were kind of figuring it out. And what happened basically in the first season was the top 3 people were like these very genuine people who were playing themselves in the game, and it seemed like they were almost rewarded for that they were liked in the show because they were just being themselves. This season was kind of the opposite. In the final 5, I think 3 were catfish, and 2 were genuine, and I think one of the genuine people came in second. But the catfish won this season, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think it. If you go back and watch the season, I definitely don't think the person that won, their name was, I believe, Trevor. That was the character in the show, but Delisa, his wife, was playing him. She won, and she was a great character. But the runner-up was this girl named Chloe Veitch, who was also on the show Too Hot to Handle. Have you ever heard of that show?
I have. I don't remember what it's about. All these shows kind of sound the same to me.
Yeah. It's I'm pretty sure it's like a British like dating show or something like that. But she was great. She was super genuine, nice. I really wanted her to win. I think the really interesting thing about
to handle Netflix $100,000 celibacy challenge with sexy singles. Interesting.
Which is really funny because after the show ended, it seems like she's now dating a contestant who is like openly a virgin on the show. So maybe taking some tips from Too Hot to Handle. But just like I think the one thing I thought was really funny about this season was they had a person who came on and tried to catfish as Lance Bass because they were Lance Bass's personal assistant. So that was like a really interesting part of the season. And overall, just the gameplay seems to be getting better. It almost feels like you're watching Survivor from those early seasons as they like start to figure out the gameplay more. So, if you like stupid reality shows and kind of mindless things, definitely worth throwing on. But it's a stupid reality show, so take that for what it is. But we're gonna move on to something that I think we're both a little bit more excited for. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see my background and Dave's background in a second. And that's Star Wars The Bad Batch. Dropped its first 2 episodes this past week on May the 4th, Star Wars Day, and then the following Friday, May 7th. And Dave, you're a little bit more familiar with was Clone Force 99 as they appeared in the Clone Wars animated series, which I have not watched and you have, so you're a little bit more aware of these characters than I am. But watching these first 2 episodes, an hour-long introductory episode and like a 30-minute second episode, I felt like this did a pretty good job of laying the groundwork, introducing the characters, setting up the conflict, adding some parts to the gap or some of the holes in the Clone Wars story a little bit, with Executive Order 66 or whatever Palpatine calls it. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. It's still a little kiddish for me at times, but overall I thought it was not bad. What did you think of the first 2 episodes?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I would say that it's a show that you definitely get more out of if you're a fan of Star Wars: The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. The Bad Batch characters were only introduced last year, in the first arc of Clone Wars Season 7, the final season. So that final season only concluded a year ago on May the 4th. So they're new characters. And it's funny because if you remember at Disney Investor Day last year, when they announced all the Disney Plus stuff for Marvel and Star Wars, among other things, and a lot of Star Wars projects, they also announced, oh, there's another animated show coming out based on the Bad Batch. And I think the consensus reaction was like, huh, do we need that? Like, I don't know if anyone was clamoring for an animated show about the Bad Batch. Like, everyone's really excited for seeing what's up with Ezra after the end of Rebels, and we assume that'll happen with Ahsoka and the Ahsoka like action show. But still, like, no one's like clamoring for this, right? Like, it's definitely like, going back. But after watching that first episode in particular, and knowing the track record that Dave Filoni has set out himself, and he's not super involved with the Bad Batch, but we have a good track record with Lucasfilm Animation at this point. It definitely feels like something that is going to be worth watching. Yes, it's going to be lower stakes at the end of the day. It's a prequel show. We know exactly when this is taking place. We know what happens after this. We know what happens before this. It's not going to be the most consequential thing in the world. We're not getting a baby Yoda showing up on this show, although there might be some similarities in terms of how the Omega character functions the way Grogu did for the Mandalorian. But, you know, filling out the timeline, if you care about that, and just kind of being a fun hang, like episode to episode, all the other Star Wars animated shows were, if that's your expectations, I have a feeling Bad Batch is going to deliver. And I thought the first episode was really strong, and definitely immediately erased those thoughts I had about it kind of having an extraneous feel. So I quite enjoyed the start.
Yeah, you know, I think as someone that did not watch the last season of Clone Wars from last year, I was a little bit concerned that I was going to go into this and they were just going to jump right in, and I was going to have to probably go back and watch to figure out what's going on. But pretty much they're like, yeah, if you did not watch that, you can figure this out, because we're just going to tell you who each one of these characters are, what their background stories are. They explained exactly how they got to be this batch of clones who are not following orders and think and act differently from other clones. They set up everything with Tarkin, I think, they lay it right out there for you. He doesn't like clones, so he doesn't want these clones to be
cloning. We're ending cloning. Conscription's cheaper. It's an economic problem. How fascinating. Not sure how that works exactly, but go with it.
Yeah. In listening to it, I was like, it's pretty interesting. They have some decent like voice acting on this. I looked it up. Yeah. Just one guy?
D. Bradley Baker. Been doing this for over 10 years, dude. He voices all the clones. He's a fucking legend.
Amazing. Yeah, I thought that was a really awesome thing to find out. I do have to say, I mean, Crosshair gave him the most stereotypical bad guy voice ever. And I think that's where that, and obviously spelling things out, is where they are trying to thread the needle between the older Star Wars fans and little kids, that and you see the droid army just acting completely ridiculous and silly and unrealistically.
That's what they do.
Roger, Roger. Not a big deal. Do you feel like the conflict between Crosshair and the other clones is something you're into with this season?
Yeah, so that was actually something I quite enjoyed about the premiere, was that they quickly set up that tension between Hunter and Crosshair, but they don't string him along. I didn't expect the Bad Batch to break off and go rogue from the Empire that fast, but they really just broke the back and kept it going, and I like that choice. It's like, why string along? You know where it's headed already, so just get to the point. I like that. And yeah, it feels like Crosshair is gonna come up here and there. I think there's potential with him in terms of, and this is probably one thing I would have liked to see more of, is just seeing the Republic turn to the Empire and seeing that transition of sorts. We've got a little bit of it in episode 2 in terms of how the citizens have to act with these, these vaccine passports they have to give to the clones or whatever it is, right? And just seeing that transition would be cool if we could also see it behind the scenes of the Empire. I don't know if we're going to get that much perspective from Crosshair or Tarkin or anything. I feel like we're really going to stick with the main crew here, but just kind of seeing that transition and seeing everything get filled in, I think there's at least potential for Crosshair to be a part of that. But yeah, it feels like he is going to be the hunter. They're the hunted. You get the vibe.
Yeah, I like that choice as well, and I also kind of like how, it seems like maybe he is a little bit more clonish than the rest of the Bad Batch,
Yeah.
and how that will be like a struggle almost, similar to every Star Wars main character beat, the dark side or the light, so to speak. So I thought that was interesting. We get a couple of people showing up here, right? So we had Saul Guerrera.
Yeah, that's right off the jump.
Which I was like, obviously I'm not super familiar with him. I've read, and heard about him in this universe. But I was like, to get him this early on seems like they're just kind of really tying in some of these connections here.
Yeah, totally. Didn't expect to see Saw so soon. Obviously, he was originated on Clone Wars before Forrest Whitaker played him in Rogue One. So that was cool. Obviously, you got Tarkin. I like seeing the Kaminoans, the cloners. And I think there's more potential with them, because that's just a big question. It's like, what happened with the cloners after the Empire said we don't want no clones no more? Like, why did now let's say let them go by keeping the blast doors open so they could escape? There's some interesting threads here, and like, yeah, they're not questions anyone was like super jazzed to get answered, but I think I'll be happy to see them answered nonetheless. We know from the trailer that Fennec, Ming-Na Wen's character from The Mandalorian, will be showing up in this. That's cool synergy for sure. And of course, we expect Captain Rex to be here as well. In terms of other like plot stuff, as you mentioned with Crosshair, he's more clonish, right? So I think probably the biggest bit that people who haven't seen Clone Wars like yourself would miss, and one of the best aspects, one of the best stories about Clone Wars was in, I think, season 5 or 6. Season 5. You learn why the clones committed Order 66. You learn that they have a chip in their brain, and they're basically programmed, in a sense, to act the way the cloners intended and all that. And Crosshair kind of got a tune-up in the premiere, so his chip's like, back functioning, whereas the rest of the Bad Batch apparently, so we're told, don't really have functioning chips. That's what Tech explained to us, right? Seeing more about that, and seeing more about just the clone stuff. That was a great thing about the show Clone Wars too, was they humanized the clones. They were just cannon fodder, faceless, images in the prequels. And there's a lot more here. So again, like, it's not going to be a revelatory thing, nor is it going to be a zeitgeisty thing, but I'm happy to be with it. And it's going to be a long season, longer than the past few Clone Wars seasons. I think we're getting 16 episodes, so this will be going into August by the look of it. So that's nice.
Definitely. Just as we wrap up, what do you think of the stuff with Caleb and Deepa Balaba?
Oh yeah, so that was also unexpected. Caleb, the Padawan you see there, becomes Kanan, who is a central character in Star Wars Rebels. So that was a huge moment for anyone who's seen Rebels, of course. That story was actually portrayed in the Kanan comic, slightly different way. So there's a bit of a retcon, a bit of a tweak to how Order 66 affected Kanan. Master killed all the same. Depa Billaba, of course, if you remember, is seen on the side in Phantom Menace when Anakin is getting the test from Mace Windu. She's there chilling. Does she speak? No. But you saw that character way back in 99, if you recall. Pretty cool.
Definitely. I thought that was a really awesome way to start the episode. Great tone setter.
So Order 66 always hits, man. No matter how many times you see it, it's always effective.
Well, we'll check back in with the Bad Batch later on in the season. We're going to move on to some music now. We're going to start in Brighton. The Brighton Boys, Squid, dropping their first album, Bright Green Fields. We got this. This is a 5-piece group. We talked about Black Country New Road, talked about Black MIDI recently, and this punk, funk, sprout rock, whatever, however you want to really define it, sound continues here. Did it hit for you the same way it did with Black MIDI and Black Country? That's
a good question. And Black MIDI has an album coming up in a few weeks we'll be talking about, so make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, so you don't miss that review, and go back and watch the Black Country New Road review if you missed it. And yeah, I think that's a great place to start, because I think about them very similarly to Black Junior. Black Midi, I think they sound a little different. They're like even more distorted and out there, right?
Yeah.
But Black Country New Road and Squid seem very similar to me. And from what I understand, they have very similar origins coming up in that scene around London and Brighton over in England. So we talked about this rock scene in general as being very interesting, perhaps one of the most interesting scenes in rock there is right now, if you can even call rock having multiple scenes at this point, right? But yeah, it felt familiar to me. But because it's so out there and unique, it's still interesting. Even if it's like, the second half of an 8-minute song that's mainly instrumental. It's like, yeah, do I need to listen to that again? No. But I'm still interested to hear it. We talked about a band recently that's popular, but makes music that's not very interesting because it's super similar to a very famous legacy band, Red Van Fleet. Black Country New Road, Squid, Black Midi. No, there's no touchdowns with them. They're doing their own thing.
Yeah, I think there's like pieces, right? Like you can hear a little bit of bands, like you can hear the Talking Head influence. I think in terms of like some of the brass, some of the the horns, bringing in non-traditional drums. Like there's definitely like some bongos on here at times and things like that. So like I think there's like pieces that you can pull from. There's definitely like some metal influence. Funk obviously is here, but I think to blend it together the way that these bands do, this is exciting because this is something that feels very unique and just like happening, which is really exciting for rock. Like you mentioned, there's not a lot of new and exciting stuff. I do feel like, and I agree with what you said, Black Midi, I think hits a little bit more consistently from their the album we reviewed 2 years ago now. But I think this was a little bit more up and down in terms of tempo and pace for me. There are some songs that I thought were on par, if not better, than some of the Black Country stuff, and then there were some songs I just wanted to skip through pretty quickly. And I think when they were at their best is when they were bringing the energy. Something like the second track, GSK. I thought that track totally ruled. There's a song shortly after called the documentarian or something like that, the documentary, which I thought that song,
documentary filmmaker, yeah.
Yes, I thought that song was a big snoozer. So, and then that was a more like chilled out, like shoegazy type song. So I think where I enjoy their music most right now is when they're just bringing that like raw energy. When it's a little bit more like, I don't know, toned back. I'm not as with it.
Yeah, totally. And I think it starts off with that kind of song, Resolution Square. You have like this really high tempo, inspired drumming, and then you have the lead singer just belting it out, and like tough to explain, but like the way I guess his vocal delivery is reminiscent of other bands, but it's so energetic and it really matches the instrumentation. It's really enjoyable. And those are definitely the songs I like the most. Those are the ones that felt most familiar to me after just recently listening to Black Country New Road. I think the song like Boy Racers. Boy Racers, I really love that first half, and then because these are weird dudes, they're like, hey, here's another 4 minutes of just kind of extended outro. It's like, okay, I guess that's cool. But like, even if I don't like care for moments, and yeah, I think there's plenty of snoozers or plenty of songs that are just like they're just kind of strange or odd, or they're just loud. Maybe not everything's like low tempo either. It's like they're just kind of loud. They're yelling, they're doing whatever there is, and it's like I'm not really getting into this either. But they're doing weird shit.
Yeah,
that's what I'll come back to. It's like I just respect them doing it. Going for it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the weird shit like stands out the most to me on a track like the closing track, Pamphlets, because the guy's like has this like screeching vocal. There's like I don't even know what instrument this is. I was trying to figure it out, where it's like a squawking sound almost, kind of.
Yes, yeah, I wasn't sure either.
Yeah, but it just like really is unique and stands out on that, and it adds like this really fun vibe to the song. And it's 8 minutes, but that song totally grips me. Something like Peel Street feels a little bit more in the black MIDI type range, or even something like the track. Hold on, I just had it here. 2010, where it's just
Mhm.
like this like screaming raw energy coming from them. That it's a little bit more like punkish, I think. But I think there's a lot to like here. I also really liked narrator, Martha Sky Murphy's like whispering type vocals. I thought really added this like eeriness to like the tension of the song. So I was really impressed with this record for the most part. Again, not a perfect record, but a lot to like. And yeah, I really want to keep digging into the scene, and we will with Black MIDI because probably the most exciting thing we've had to talk about with rock in a really long time. So,
Absolutely.
at least since we've been doing the pod. So yeah, check them out. Squid. We're gonna be talking now. Moving on to a different part of the world. NCT Dream. Dave dropping their first, I guess their first actual album. They're part of a larger collective, NCT, um,
Yep.
and this is their first album in terms of their like subgroup, which is again this is subunit. So this is something that is a little different than you typically get in the United States pop world. But I thought this had some pretty awesome tracks on it. Hot Sauce, the first album, dropped today. Did you like this album?
Actually did like this album. I did not know what to expect all that much. We talked about the fourth NCT subunit quite recently, Wavy, and Wavy exists because they are specifically targeting Chinese audience, singing in Chinese. And NCT, of course, the very big, all-encompassing SM Entertainment K-pop group, over 20 members, lends itself to having multiple groups within the big group. Understand that. In the case of NCT Dream, which has been out around a few years, but mainly releasing EPs, they initially were created to target like teens, because everyone in NCT Dream at the time of founding were teenagers themselves. And I guess that's an interesting strategy, right? You don't really see something like that, because again, like something like NCT is gigantic group that people can come in and out and do their thing. Mm-hmm. Just really like isolated to the K-pop world. You don't see that anywhere else, right? And from what I understand with NCT Dream, the original plan was this like graduation system where once you were no longer 18, you would graduate off the NCT Dream roster and newer idols would take their place, right? And it's actually, I guess, an example of like fans winning out, because in 2020 they decided that the original 7 members of NCT Dream, led by one of the NCT superstars, Mark, NCT Dream was just so popular in its original iteration that no one wanted them to graduate. No, they wanted this group to stay together. And sure enough, that's what they did. And you have the original members finally coming here with Hot Sauce. So it's kind of an interesting, like a lot of K-pop groups, there's a lot of interesting meta narratives to it going in. But at the end of the day, even if you didn't know none of that, you have no idea what anything about NCT is, I think it's hard to deny a lot of these songs. There's a lot of really tightly made songs here, as we've come to expect from a lot of major label K-pop groups at this point.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting concept to have like a group that's the name is bigger than the artist. It's like, oh, you're just gonna keep moving people through rather than it being about the actual singers. It's really we should maybe talk about that a little bit more at a different time when I can formulate some more thoughts around that. But yeah, no, I totally agree with what you were saying about the music being undeniable, and I feel like it starts out pretty much right from the jump. I thought the first track and the title track, Hot Sauce, was just a really like gripping and fun pop song right away that pulled me right into the album. And then following up with maybe my favorite song on the album, I guess it was a couple of tracks later, but Dive Into You, the third track, I thought was really, really strong. Just fun pop, K-pop sound. So I don't know. I think there's a little bit of range on here. There's a little singingness, a little bit more of like the boppy, like fast-paced singing. But overall, I thought they did a lot of stuff well. What were the tracks that stood out to you?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we said this before with the Shiny Comeback and Wavy, but like a tight package, 10 songs, 35 minutes, there's surprising amount of range on the album. I agree. I think it starts off really strong. Hot Sauce, Diggity, Dive Into You, very familiar, but familiar for a good reason because they're really effective, bouncy K-pop songs. Dive Into You in particular, I thought that chorus really shined. Quite enjoyed that.
Ooh.
Yeah. Countdown 3, 2, 1. That's probably the best example of hip hop. They're not like the biggest rappers as far as like K-pop rappers go. Like, I feel like they really stick to more of the more pop leaning. And then you get the more balladry, slower stuff to round it out. So, like, I feel like a lot of these K-pop records, whatever your fancy is within the all-encompassing sound of K-pop, it seems you're getting that on this. And I'm not super familiar with those other NCT Dream EPs thus far. I believe there's 4 of them, but and that's another thing too. It's like the NCT Dream, like their identity as like the wavy identity makes sense to me. They're literally using a different language. But for NCT Dream, it's like, do they stand out as like a very distinct group apart from say NCT 127, the other big subunit of NCT, or NCT proper, which has released albums quite recently too? Like does NCT Dream really feel like musically sound that different? I don't know enough to say that. Obviously, these 7 guys led by Mark, who was in Super M and is a big K-pop force in his own regard. These seven, Dream 7, like they're clearly connected with their fans. But is the music actually that unique compared to the other projects everyone's involved in? I can't say. Because like it feels familiar to me. It's good, but like it does feel familiar.
Yeah. I think that is, one of the things about K-pop, and we've talked about quite a few K-pop stars, but there is like a very like almost a very recognizable sound, and I feel like a lot of these songs are in line with that, like you said. But I also feel like 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 the ones that you mentioned, those first 3 tracks, I really liked Rocket, A&L, like. You hear those a lot on like even like a similar sound even on like American pop charts at this point. There's a formula to a lot of these pop songs. So even if they are, kind of in the same vein as a lot of these things, they're still making really quality songs. And if obviously they're getting enough attention where whether they're standing out for their sound or for just who these guys are, they're doing something that is really connecting with their fans. And that's more than a lot of groups ever end up doing. So good on them. I wish I spoke Korean because I would have liked to know more on like what the lyrics were saying. But I enjoyed the songs where they do sing in American a couple of times.
Gotta go.
American English. Wow, fucking American asshole right here.
You can go on YouTube and turn on subtitles, and you kind of get the auto-generated stuff to keep up. I found that. I've done it for BTS, and like it works, for the most part. But yeah, I mean, with the music, you can connect with the music without understanding anything they're saying. It's a good sign.
Yeah,
no question.
I know, it's funny as you were saying that. I'm like, yeah, BTS is definitely one of the groups that stands out to me as like a more unique sound. Then I was like, oh yeah, because they're BTS and they're the most famous group in the world.
Right.
So
also, I wanted to note today on Twitter, the release day, May 10th for Hot Sauce, there was a K-pop trend, worldwide trend happening, but it wasn't NCT Dream. Like, they were trending too, but a higher up trend was the latest comeback for EXO, which is the other gigantic SM band that's a few years older than NCT. And I found that incredibly strange that SM would announce a hotly anticipated comeback for EXO the very same day one of their other marquee groups is releasing something. Because honestly, they're all super tactical with how they promote everything on social media and stuff. Why on earth would you do that on the same day? You're just sucking the air out of NCT Dream's like big day,
Stepping on your own product. Kind of interesting.
Very weird.
Well, we'll be talking about more K-pop releases as they come. But let's move to Oakland.
That's right.
We're going to be talking about ALLBLACK here. Who, this is the first time I think I've really listened to him. I recognize the name though, so maybe you can enlighten me on why that is, or maybe it's just something that the name just looks familiar for whatever reason. This is his first album, right, or second?
He calls it his debut album. He has a litany of EPs out thus far. Yeah. It's far from his first drop. He's 29. Yeah.
I was, obviously doing a little bit of background research. Like, debut album. There we go. And then I went on Spotify and I was like, his discography is like 10 mixtapes deep. I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't really know what to do here. But yeah, thank you for fucking with me. DY4FWM, the debut album from All Black. I don't know. What to say about this album, Dave? I'll let you go first. Was this an album you were looking forward to, anticipating?
Right, so I wasn't like anticipating it any more than the next All Black release, just because I wasn't like thinking the debut album was forthcoming. I don't know. You look at this guy. I guess I kind of viewed like Out Calls as his debut album. If you look at the list of them, but he's released a lot of stuff. Usually 40 minutes or less. For the most part, they all sound the same. So I don't know if this really feels any more album-like than his other stuff. But either way, happy to listen to it, of course, just because I'd gotten into him several years into his career because, he was on the G-Eazy West Coast remix. And I think that was a really great feature from his because he follows up Blueface. Blueface very famous for boxing the beat, if you will, not always staying in rhythm with it. And you have All Black showing up and totally burning the beat down and like not having any interest in staying in pocket on the beat. And I'm like, who is this? And I understand, the Jeezy connections because they're both Oakland boys. Makes sense. Jeezy pops back up, of course, on Thank You for Fucking With Me. Then I get, do a little digging and I'm like, All Black is just like one of those like local hometown heroes at this point for Bay Area rap, for Oakland in particular. His song Canadian Goose from 2017 was a big hit with the Golden State Warriors. Klay Thompson in particular really expressed his love for the song. They played it at their victory parade and apparently a lot during the season in the locker room. So he's made a name in the Bay long before he had any real national recognition. He had that Kenny Beats project a few years back. He seemed to be slowly rising, and I really think that G-Eazy look gave him, or exposed him a little bit more to the national audience, I think. And if you think about it, like, all the West Coast rappers from the Bay rappers, for the most part, they don't make national names all the time. Like, obviously, we know G-Eazy, he's ascended to pop because of what he looks like. Other than that, like, and discounting the legends like E40 and Too Short aside, no one really seems to make it all the way through, right? Like, we talked about Guap Dad 4000. You got SOBRB. We talked about Pilo. A lot of these guys, it's like you're either really up on your rap to know who they are, or you might just recognize the name because they're on a bigger artist song like All Black was with that G-Eazy thing, right? But I feel like, and I feel you listen to this, Thank You for Fucking With Me, I don't think All Black's doing anything to compromise who he is or what this Bay rap sounds like. And I don't, so this long way of saying, I don't think All Black's like, going to become like a national rap star or anything. He's just going to be a legend in the Bay. And that's totally fine, because this is very much Bay Area shit. And it fucking bounces. And I think it sounds good. I think the biggest sticking point probably with All Black is if you can get a handle on his flow. Because, like I said, he raps quite fast. And from what I understand, it's actually, there's a Detroit influence on the Bay sound. And that really comes out in All Black. And as a result, the pockets of the beat are often conflicted with the flow, and it's it can be interesting at times. I think when you have like a lesser song from someone who sounds like this, it does kind of feel a little jumbled. But I also respect that he has that really rapid fire flow, and he's doing it on those bouncy Bay beats. So I enjoy it.
Yeah, bouncy is the right way to describe it, and I think, I thought there were some songs on here that really stood out. The first track, Life of a P, super fun, energetic, almost kind of reminds me of like in the same family as like Fade from Kanye in terms of like the bass, that bum 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 like kind of thing. But as I was listening back to a couple of these tracks today, and second time around, I usually am like, there was a moment I wanted to catch here, or like kind of like go back to this. I started noticing that a lot of the songs sounded very, very similar to me. And I think that would probably be my biggest knock. While I think he seems like a really talented rapper, and like he actually just seems like he's like you said, going to be a legend in his own right in terms of just the technical abilities. I think there's a lot of sameness in terms of the production on this and the sound on this, and I think the lack of variety. The second time, kind of digging through, I was like, I don't know, I was kind of losing interest. Now I do have to say, back half of the album, you get a Vince Staples feature. I perked back up at that. I thought Vince was great.
That was a great Vince performance. I thought that song in general was really nice because that's actually a little different speed for All Black too on that song. We Straight, second last song, and you get Vince with a really inspired feature. I thought that was a great pairing.
Yeah, that stood out to me, perked me back up. But you know, Life of a P, I think I really liked. Was it P's and Q's? I can't remember.
Too.
Yeah, P's and Q's too. And then definitely We Straight were like the top 3 for me. Also, I thought Do or Die with Sada Baby, little underwhelming, but still always enjoy seeing Sada Baby on the track. So what stood out to you?
Yeah, speaking to the sound, 10 of the 14 songs are produced by DTB, who is a less famous DJ who's made a lot of stuff for the Bay. I actually don't know if he's based in the Bay, but he's made a lot of stuff for people in the Bay. And I think that's the thing. It's like if you like this kind of stuff, you're happy to hear the classic, the 3 bounces on the drum to kick off the beat, and next thing you know, you listen to a big beat. Pilo didn't produce anything, but they're very reminiscent of how Pilo makes his songs. I'm happy to just hear that bounce because in general, like I said, you don't really get anything indebted to Bay Area production on a national scale unless it's something like DJ Mustard or making stuff for YG, and then I guess you're really making LA music. So I think you have to be listening to this for that specific scenes. Like when you listen to like I said, Detroit rap, right? Like Lil Yachty just released that Michigan Boy Boat project. If you were a Lil Yachty fan, if you were an Atlanta rap fan, you're like, what the fuck is this? But if you were a Detroit rap fan, you like Michigan rap, you would actually recognize him doing something different there. That's why I feel like you have to listen to All Black and be like, this is Bay music. Yeah. You have to listen to it for that. You know what I mean? And in terms of All Black, I think he's interesting to me because he actually was a pimp in his earlier days. He didn't just rap about being one, he actually was one, but he doesn't actually brag about it all that much. You get to listen for the metaphors to actually pick up on it in his music, which I appreciate. But yeah, as a performer, I think I liked his stuff on Ego, which is also produced by Kenny Beats, funny enough. But yeah, I think this, I guess, is a nice place to start, but all of his projects, I think, have that thing where they all sound, he sounds pretty consistent throughout, and that can feel samey. I totally agree. But you just have to kind of, I think, pick out what you like and listen to it for the specific, subgenre that it is. And actually, a note about We Straight with Vince Staples, that song had actually come out without Vince's feature in 2018. Then it got re-released on this with the new Vince feature. So I'm very happy about that, obviously.
Yeah, All Black. If you like that Bay Area sound, check it out. Even I think a couple of these tracks, Life of a P for me would be the place I would recommend starting and seeing and going from there. Also check out We Straight. But why don't we move on to, I think, a album we both were really excited to talk about. First off, obviously this is a posthumous album for MF Doom with Super What, the Czarface and MF Doom team up. Second album that these two have put out. Last one was Czarface meets Metalface. Is that
2018?
Yeah, 2018. And we both really like that album too.
Totally.
I think all of the MF Doom touches mixed with like the old school Czarface, like straight up rap. It's just like a shot of adrenaline into our veins. Goes hard, and there's a lot of that on this. This was an album that was finished last year, almost exactly a year ago. Got pushed back with COVID, like many albums did. So it doesn't sound like unfinished. Doesn't sound like most posthumous albums do, where they're kind of like chopping stuff together. I think of someone like Lil Peep, that was just like completely
copy paste.
Yeah, exactly. So this doesn't feel like that, but it does kind of feel like a period on the MF Doom, career, which maybe we'll talk about. But what did you just think about the album in general? Super what?
Yeah, totally. I liked it a lot. I liked it more than a lot of the other Czarface albums I've listened to. We last talked about them for Czarface meets Ghostface, obviously Ghostface Killer collab. And since then, they had released 2 other ones that was just Czarface, just Inspect the Deck, 7L, and Esoteric. We didn't have to talk about those. But I like this one a lot more than a bunch of the other ones I've heard from them. And it's funny because MF Doom is not on every song. The Doom feels like a guest, a consistent guest more than anything else. So as a posthumous record, it almost feels to me like how you'll get posthumous verses from like a Juice WRLD popping up once in a while, just because Young Thug had the song chilling and he finally got it ready and put it out, right? And he had that verse in the can. It kind of feels like that, like Czarface had made this collab with MF Doom for a little bit, and it's ready to make this. So it's kind of weird to think of it as like one of the final. I don't think it's the final, but one of the final MF Doom releases, right? Because it's like it's subtle. Like he's just one of the dudes on this.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I actually like that comparison to Juice WRLD more, right? Where it's like you have a verse that's kind of already made popping up. I guess it's a little different because, I guess with Doom, I think about his sound and like the production around that sound more than I actually like. I guess think about like a famous verse from him or something like that. But I gotta say, like, I didn't think there was like a bad song on here necessarily. I thought there were some songs that definitely stuck out to me more than others, including, and this I feel like I'm a bit on repeat today, but the first track, "The King and I," it has this long intro to it, but once the song gets going, it's like super triumphant and super upbeat. It's got like the xylophone kind of just like popping off to like create this like, I don't know, like the king has arrived type feel to it. I thought that track was, a great like tone setter.
And DMC booming bass in his voice, just triumphant. Sounds great.
An amazing way to kick it off. And then this is kind of, it's supposed to be like a double album in a sense, like a split album, I guess. The first 4 tracks are, I don't know if that was the MF side or the Czarface side, and the second half supposed to be the other person's side. There's a accompanying comic book from Esoteric if you want to check that out for this. But I thought some of the stuff on the second half stood out to me a lot. Well, obviously Doom Unto Others is like right in the middle, but I really liked that track a lot. That like slow like in the background, like just rapping over like that. And it's a pretty typical drum beat, but it just like feels very familiar, I guess, for someone like Doom. And then I guess the other track that I really liked was "This Is Canon Now." I thought that track was awesome, and they were just spitting comic book bars, like
Esoteric in particular. His self-referential style, his reference heavy, punchline heavy rapping is, I think, very much a Czarface trademark at this point, right? And specifically focused on stuff like nerd culture, right? You literally have a song here called Nando Calrissian. And like to those references, right? I think there's so many. Early on, you get the bass hits on Aaron Judge, which I thought was really great.
Even though he strikes out 5 times a game. I mean,
yeah, it's not the most
timely.
Maybe you don't watch too much baseball, bro. But I think Esoteric is my favorite reference of all. And again, there's many. You can listen to this multiple times just to listen for references you didn't catch the first time, right? The one where he's like, he rhymes Houdini with Utini, the noise the Jawas from Star Wars say. And I'm like, God, I've never heard a Jawa bar before. That was fucking great.
Amazing.
Also, in was it a Back in the Action? Breaking the Action? Breaking the Action. There's a Hollywood Foreign Press reference, very timely right now with the Golden Globes being canceled. And Amanda Calrissian at the end. You got a Cliff Booth reference, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Again, for the real heads with that one.
Well, old buddy. I actually thank you for shouting out Breaking the Action, because I thought that track just, pound for pound could go up against any of these. It's so jazzy and like, I don't know, it feels like a very smooth track and very much of what you would expect these two to be putting together. And I think just overall, this is a great pairing, and it's just kind of sad to think that we got 2 albums out of it, but who knows how much other really quality music they could have gone on to make as the MF Doom and Czarface the group together. Um, yeah, and I mean, what else about the album, Sidar? What else did you want to shout out about it? This is the
7L's production always stands out because it almost feels like it fits the nerd culture referential vibes that esoteric in particular is often going for. And like, yeah, just think about that, like those beats combined with punchline heavy, reference heavy rapping, it just stands out because it's unique to anything else that comes out these days, especially anything that gets any kind of eyeballs, right? So, and then of course the technical ability is also there.
For sure.
And INS is again part of Czarface. So if you want to throw back to the 90s, you certainly can. And hearing INS and MF Doom, and Esoteric, who's an OG in his own regard, hearing them all together, rapping their asses off, it's refreshing. It's fun. And Super What also is a short record. I think I listened to the first 4 songs. I just restarted them after I finished them because I'm like, I was just so digging it, and I was let me listen for more. Let me catch those lines again. So I think most of their albums too, they're rewarding in that regard to repeat listening, which is pretty rare in rap.
No, I completely agree. Definitely worth checking out. R.I.P. Doom. Yeah, that's gonna do it for us today for music. But Dave, we do have a movie left on our docket, and boy, what a movie it is. We got our guy. I'm gonna call him our guy because I feel like we have been diamond hands on the Andrew Garfield stock.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah, I think Andrew Garfield.
I would buy the dip right now, the mainstream dip.
Yeah, especially with this year coming up again. Check out our 2020 Oscars preview. But what was the movie, Under the Silver Lake? Or that I think that movie, though I think there's some weirdness to it. We were kind of looking at that and saying like, all right, Garfield, he's back from Spider-Man. He's like doing weird shit again. Like let's see where this goes. Right?
Talented actor, just make movies, man. Just do it.
Yeah. And I guess before that, he was in Hacksaw Ridge and Silence, which Silence I think a little bit less appreciated. Hacksaw Ridge obviously was award season darling that year, 2016. Yeah. But this year we got The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Tick Tick Boom, which we talked about, or we're looking forward to those. But here it comes in mainstream, right? This movie that was directed by Gia Coppola, I believe granddaughter of Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, and niece of Sophia.
And, he's alongside Maya Hawke, who is someone, you just mentioned Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think someone that we really were digging. And, from her, she wasn't Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and also from Stranger Things, and just someone that overall we're like, okay, there's something here. Obviously daughter of Ethan Hawke, but on her own right, it seems to be very
and really looks like her mom at this point, Uma Thurman.
Which what a power couple those two were. But anyways, going back to this movie, I thought mainstream was just way too on the nose for me.
You think?
And it's trying to touch on a lot of different things. It premiered at the Venice Film Festival in September of last year. Coming out now on demand.
Shot in full in 2019.
So it's been in the can for a while. But it's really like Garfield turning it up to 11 and just being super weird, and everybody else just kind of like around him. And I feel like it's almost like too much for any of its meaning to actually land, in my opinion. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, it's funny because the first 20 minutes, you're not really sure what the plot is. And I was like, is this going to be some meditative thing? No, actually not at all. Not at all. It's going to rip right into that plot once you get there. And the unfortunate thing is the subtlety is one thing, but it also just kind of felt dated. It's not an intelligent satirization of the internet and Gen Z. It's not that at all. It's like, what are our surface level, like, what's it boil down to? It's like people are on their phones too much. People are photoshopping their Instagrams. Like, that's all you got? Like, that's the take? Okay, cool. But like, the other thing, like the YouTube thing, is a game show on YouTube. Like, that doesn't feel even like it's an understanding of how YouTube works and how little kids watch YouTube at all, to be honest. Watching from, towards the beginning, I'm like, they're going over some like Jake Paul shit, like the hijinks and the actually honestly, in the beginning when Garfield's character, he's more like meditative, and he's like speaking his thoughts on life. I'm like, oh, it actually kind of reminds me of Logan Paul and how Logan Paul speaks on his podcast, and then he actually transitions into more like gimmicks and gotcha stuff, and it's more reminiscent of like early Jake Paul. And then Jake Paul himself shows up playing himself later on. I'm like, oh my god, yeah, there's just not an ounce of subtlety, let alone like actual awareness of what it's trying to lampoon. So I found it awfully frustrating.
Yeah, even the casting of like Johnny Knoxville as the talk show host is pretty much like this is the predecessor to all these like stunt type, reality YouTube stars. Like it's not subtle at all, and then you kind of like think back to just like the way the movie progresses in general, right? And so it follows Frankie, played by Maya Hawke, as she's trying to like break into film or art, kind of vague, and even she isn't really sure as a character what she's trying to do, but she's enamored with Link, who's Andrew Garfield's character, and just his weirdness, really. And she posted a video of him speaking on YouTube, gets all these hits. So then her and her coworker Jake kind of start teaming up to figure out how they can channel this guy's weirdness into some sort of stardom. And I actually think that those parts, even though it does kind of flip pretty quickly, I feel like, where like he's like pretty reluctant, and all of a sudden he's like full force like into the like Jake Paul stunt, like in someone's backyard, like
succumbs to the fame and the desire for more, right?
I feel like that happens pretty quick, but I do feel like that's like a fun part of the movie where you're just kind of like along for the ride. And then it pretty, like you said, when it turns into this like game show and Jason Schwartzman shows up and they're obviously being exploited by this like really grimy agent guy, that's when it starts to feel like, where is this really like going? And I think the beats are pretty easy to tell. It's this rise and fall of this person who gets too much fame too quickly, and no one actually was like listening to what this guy was saying. They just were enjoying the weirdness. But like, I don't know. Again, I feel like I know he embarrasses this girl on this live YouTube
game show, Euphoria fame.
Yeah, shout out her. Which I was like, oh, it's nice to see you. I feel like there was another Euphoria person on this too, but maybe I'm misremembering. But anyways, I just feel like nowadays, if that person was exposed for having edited their pictures, a lot of times it would have been like, yeah, so what? Like, everybody knows this. This isn't something that is like some great revelation that,
especially in her case, as a birthmark. It's not like she was making herself not have, like love handles or something. You know, it's like, God, it's like in terms of internet sins, this is very low down the list.
Yeah, and especially like I at least in 2021 internet culture, I feel like a lot of Gen Z would have been actually very supportive of her and been like, yeah, you look great with the birthmark. You shouldn't do this. Like, you're beautiful either way. Like, that's a lot of what I see on TikTok is like people building each other up. So again, this, I think, going back to your dated remark, this does feel dated in that sense. And I just was kind of like, I think this is getting a little lost in the sauce here at the end.
Right.
Also, the love triangle of it all didn't make any intrigue for me at all. Did that work for you?
Oh, no, it didn't. I did like Nat Wolf's line at the bar, though, where he was like just roasting the kid for having a shitty fake ID, and he gives him a drink anyway. I also really like Johnny Knoxville's bit where he's like, oh, get off the cross, we need the wood.
Yeah, that
That's
was
a
pretty
great
good.
line. But I think this would have felt dated even if we got it when it was supposed to come out. Like, this was made in 2019, probably would have come out in early 2020. It would have felt dated then too. It's not like this was a victim of the pandemic. I just think its point of view was ultimately a very, very surface level, and I don't want to say uninformed, but just not in depth.
Yeah. Luckily, seems like Garfield has better stuff ahead of him, and I think Maya Hawke does too. So,
yeah,
shout out to them. Just real quick, what are your thoughts on Jason Schwartzman?
You know, I thought he was effective as like a sleazy agent type. It actually reminded me of the kind of if this was more updated, just in terms of things now. It's like he would have played like the weird like TikTok creator house manager or something.
Yeah,
I could totally see it. This definitely felt more in line with what he can do outside of Wes Anderson role, less so than say Fargo season 4, where he very much felt out of his depth and miscast.
Yeah, this really felt like the correction of his Fargo character to me. You know, like where he, instead of him having to be like this like bombastic guy, he could just be like sleazy and, you know, grimy. And I thought he was pretty effective. I also just don't know if I really think he's like that great of an actor, but I'm like,
Right.
neither here nor there really. Well, I would say if you really want to check out mainstream, give it a watch. But maybe one that you could skip. But if you do watch, leave your thoughts below. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on SoundCloud.com/nostalgiapod. But Dave, I think that does it for us this week. What do we got for next week?
3 notable music drops. EP from Georgia Smith, been waiting for new Georgia music for quite some time.
Yeah.
Also a new album from St. Vincent, and of course a new album from J. Cole himself. Been a minute since we... Jake Paul himself. No, J. Cole.
Oh, J. Cole. I think it's Jake Paul. I was like, what?
Yeah, been a few years for J. Cole solo albums. Also, on HBO Max / theaters, you get Those Who Wish Me Dead, the Taylor Sheridan movie with Angelina Jolie. And then perhaps not as good, we get The Woman in the Window with Amy Adams finally coming out on Netflix. So that's a notable grouping there. And we also will be doing album rankings separately, so make sure you check that out on YouTube.
You mean newest African League basketball player, J. Cole?
The very same.
That very one. Well, we'll be talking about him next week. Again, hit that subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. And also follow our Twitter @nostalgiapod, where we talk about things that we don't talk about here. We'll catch you next week.